Ahojte moji milí tretiaci, vítam vás pri ďalšej hodine, ktorú som vám ako tradične nahral už dopredu, hneď v piatok po obede, tesne po obede, mám 12., ale vy už samozrejme podľa rozvrhu teda máte buď 15. v pondelok alebo 19. v piatok. Budeme pokračovať a dokončíme si tému, ktorú tu máme, a to sú teda zámorské objavy. Tam už to veľa nemáme, ale sú skôr dôležité následky, o ktorých vám porozprávam. No a myslím, že by bez problémov sme mali začať aj ďalšiu a poslednú tému zo svetového novoveku, a to sú náboženské vojny vychádzajúce z reformácie. No tam je veľká prezentácia, čiže my budeme pokračovať ďalej. Aj takto nezabudnite teda využiť informácie, ktoré máte tu na hodine na vypracovanie vašich zadaní. A vzhľadom na to, že ideme na poslednú tému, tak vyzerá, že sa už črtá termín odovzdania, ktorý ja odhadujem, ale to vám ešte ja presne napíšem podľa tých hodín, ako sa budú vyvíjať, ale takže do mesiaca by sme to mali bez problémov skončiť za tie 4 hodiny, čiže začiatkom apríla, možno niekedy, alebo v prvej tretine apríla by mohlo byť to odovzdanie. Takže ja vám termínček ešte poviem, ale teda treba s tým počítať, treba s tým robiť. V prípade, že by vystrelila motika, tak ja vám možno ten termín nechám aj tak, a ďalšiu tému, ktorú pôjdeme, a to bude už po slovensky téma Habsburská monarchia, respektíve Slovensko-Habsburskej monarchii, tak bude po slovensky, bude iná, na to budete mať zase iný čas. Dobre. A nezabudnite teda, že som vám tradične dal nejakú otázku. Teraz ešte netuším v tejto chvíli akú, ale budete ju mať teda zodpovedať. Tretia B, vy ste mali celkom aj výhodu, že ste dostali nejaké bonusové jednotky, tak mal by som aj C-čkarom niečo vymyslieť, nech máte takú možnosť. Uvidíme. Dobre, poďme však ďalej nebudeme to zdržovať. OK, so the last sorry. The previous lesson we did talk about the discovery and the conquest of America that was done actually by the Spaniards, despite it was of course done by Genoese, by Genoese, Christopher Columbus, navigator from Genoa, and also the voyage around the world was Spanish, despite it was commanded mostly by Fernando Magallanes, but later Juan Sebastian del Elcano was the one who brought these guys in here. Very quickly, I had to tell you about the Aztec Empire and the Incas Empire and the conquest by Spaniards and their Native American allies. So it's really interesting stories, and again, I'm really a bit surprised that there are no movies about us. That would probably be very sad. And Mexico in here. Okay, the Incas Empire again, so it's good to read, to analyze these pictures in here, but I think in your assignment there are different things. So what are we going to move on are the results of Spanish conquest of Central and South America. Today, of course, we would call it Latin America, because Spanish language and also Portuguese language comes from Latin. So it's logical that this part of Americas would be not only Spanish but even Portuguese, Latin together. There are actually many of the impacts of the results. So the first one I picked up is the Golden Paradox. Golden Paradox is actually the maybe I should use this one. Yeah, the Golden Paradox is a name for economic crisis that was caused by these discoveries in Europe, or maybe in international trade. What happened? Spaniards, when they came here, they lusted for gold, and they gained a lot of gold from the Aztec Empire and even from Incas Empire. If you remember, that was the story when Atahualpa was captured, so Spaniards promised to release him only if Incas can gather gold and silver in a big, huge room that would be filled up by the line that Francisco Pizarro actually engraved on the on the wall. What happened? That's fine, but now Spanish galeonas, a huge ship filled with these golden treasures, were crossing the Atlantic Ocean back to Europe and bringing this gold and silver in here. Yeah, English pirates tried to attack them. We'll talk about this of Elizabeth, the Queen of England, how she actually was sending these corsairs to attack Spanish galeonas, Spanish ships. But the point is that Spain actually had this gold and silver, and they start to use it. They start to pay for building the churches, especially for beautiful Baroque cathedrals. And also the other thing was that they start to use it for military campaigns, especially in these wars, in these religious wars they were fighting in Netherlands, in Hungary against Ottoman Turks, against Protestant dukes in Germany, in Italy, in Austria, and finally, eventually, in 30 Years' War in the mid 17th century. Eventually, Philip II, King of Spain, he used the largest amount of gold for building uh, a huge palace that they supposed to be the biggest for the time, called El Escorial, and even today it is second biggest stone building in the world after the pyramid of Cheops in Egypt. So this is one of these. Actually, I got a photo from this palace. In front of this gate I am like this small, like a pond. You can barely see the people like in front of the gate, so it's really huge. And imagine it's like building like 20 stadiums, maybe this one. So really like small people, the gates are really huge. Actually, it was not used in, I would say, enough in this proper way, so that was really wasting money from their point of view. Okay, this is my recording video for the graduates, so let's go back to the presentation. What happened? So this caused actually the thing that Spain wasted it, and suddenly in Europe there was so much gold and silver in form of coins spreading around that suddenly the value of the money started to fall. In economy, this is called devaluation of the currency. At the time, it was of course based upon the amount of gold and silver that is spread it all around. But in case there is too much of it, it's not so worthy, and people can be, I don't know, lazy, or not lazy, I would say they can actually exchange their products for bigger amount of gold because it is there, it is present. So that caused that this price revolution hit, for example, Banska Štiavnica, and mining uprising in 1525 and 1526. The point was that Hungary didn't have so much gold because mines were flooded, and suddenly there was too much gold and silver, and mine owners were not able to exchange it for the same labor, for similar products, and thus they were bankrupting. So this is interesting how the conquest of Incas or Aztec Empire causes uprising on the other side of the world, in Europe, in Slovakia, and Banska Bystrica, Štiavnica, and Odruša. So that's why, while Spain wasted those money on churches, they didn't invest it in something that could circulate money and production. So other new countries that were developed on trade, on guilds, on merchants, and actually business, like entrepreneurship, či podnikanie, and that was England, France, and the Netherlands as new colonial powers. Okay, the other thing that I give question to 3C, how would you call people in these lands? Because you know that Columbus and many others call them Indians, and even today in the movies and westerns they're called Indians, which is not, of course, correct because they are not Indians. English and even Dutch, they call it West Indies and East Indies. West India and East India, to make a difference, still is not okay. Native Americans, even this commonly used name, it's not correct because they got nothing to do with Amerigo Vespucci, or they didn't call their continent America in pre-Columbian period. So that's why even for Africa, or maybe for these other uh, nations and tribes in America, would be called indigenous, čiže domorodí obyvateľia, which doesn't mean that they must be primitive, as we know, and especially not in case of Asia. Still, Native Americans were not used for like forced labor kind of slavery, and they were quickly dying in mines and on plantations that Spaniards established that were building in here. And that's why this Europeans started to bring black slaves from Africa for labor. So slavery was widely used. If you remember, I told you that Portuguese had already known this, not in such a big, large scale. And as you'll see in the maps, that was really, really big business and very sad. Of course, while Native Americans, indigenous people, but also black people from Africa, main distinctive thing was the color of their skin. That's why even Europeans were called Christians or the whites, okay, gringos. And of course, that's why they call them the black people or red people or whatever, yellow people, despite it doesn't mean to be. Especially Spaniards or Portuguese were not so pale skin as northern Europeans. Okay, indigenous cultures vanished due to diseases and annihilation. Only small numbers survive in the rainforests and mountains of Brazil, Bolivia, Colombia, and Mexico. This is the thing that many people, most of the indigenous pre-Columbian population, probably had died before they even met Europeans, because diseases, the epidemic spread it. That was smallpox, measles, and other things that didn't have resistance. Of course, Spaniards got infected in brand new diseases that they brought to Europe and spread it all by the world, but I explain it too. The other thing is that Spaniards occupied all these countries except of this Central and South America. I'm not talking about Northern America dominantly. And except of Brazil, they were actually in all these lands that you have in here, this green color and even this light green in south west of USA. Still, Brazil is like Portuguese speaking, so not very big difference. I would say it's like Polish and Slovak, or maybe Czech and Polish, and they start to mix. Especially, it's even from Hernando Cortes. So he married. They had children with his wife Malinche, and already these guys were not white, not Indian, not indigenous. So even when somebody says that the multi-ethnical state, multi-ethnicity is not working, it is working, because human races, ethnic groups, and tribes and DNA haplogroups are mixing. You cannot like stop love and mating, among the people. So in this way, so-called Creoles appeared, who were people mixed from European white population and indigenous Americans. Indigenous remained there, but as I said, only in these rainforests and mountains, where it was too difficult for the colonists, for the settlers from Europe to settle down and actually banish them for the land, sometimes to kill them. All the tribes were being burned, killed, forced to accept Christianity. Those remained there. So they still were there, especially in these countries that I mentioned about. Then there were many African slaves. You'll see in the maps that some countries of Latin America had most of this population, apart from USA, the southeast part states of USA. That was especially Brazil, but also Venezuela, partially Colombia, but also Suriname. That was the only Dutch remaining colony even today. It was called Dutch Guiana, then British Guiana, and French Guiana. They're all the countries north of Brazil, not of these lands. Okay, and of course Hispanic colonies. That's why you had a lot of white people, even blonde or red-haired guys from Europe living in here, from all these countries, from Mexico down to Argentina. Of course, in the countries that had, how to say, mild climate. That Europeans enjoyed more, favored more. That was especially in case of south of Brazil, which is Uruguay, Paraguay, Argentina, and Chile. So these countries had dominant population. I would say this is white European, this Hispanic, as we call it, Hispanic colonies. So it is really interesting. And if somebody says that multiculture doesn't exist, what about Latin America and their 500 years of history? So definitely, I would say it does exist. Okay, another map with the colonies just after the conquest. So they explain most of these effects. Okay, how it appeared at the this seems to be like first half of the 16th century, or just after this conquest of Incas Empire, this brown, or what is the color, are Spanish territories, and they call it, as you see, New Spain, Nueva España. West Indies generally call this island, but as you can see, for example, even Swedish had part of their like Dominican Republic. Portuguese already colonizing the coast of Brazil according to the Treaty of Tordesillas, but if you remember the meridian, they went far beyond the border. Then we have Portuguese, okay, we did. French, which is green, not very much, but they established already this French Guiana and this Haiti Republic. This is interesting. And later on, they will establish many colonies here from Quebec, Montreal, and so on. So the expeditions in here and in here. This way, as you will see, because they're looking for the passage to the Pacific Ocean. Because still, when they realize there is not so much gold, and these are like non-civilized, underdeveloped cultures, so they still were looking for the route to for the passage to Asia. So for that reason, they believe that here in along the St. Lawrence River and Great Lakes there can be some passage to the Pacific Ocean. Okay, and English in here, especially on the coast, we'll mention also John Cabot, and they start to build like colonies. They were not they didn't have inspirations for these like great discoveries. Okay, this is the price of value of gold and silver from Spanish America, and as you can see, as it was growing and it was rising and falling back again. So this is actually another example. This map depicts the slave trade, Atlantic slave trade, mostly Portuguese who bought it from Arabic slave masters who very often, like in Ghana and Senegal, Guinea, were attacking these Black African villages and selling them to Portuguese or to the British, to the English and British or French, and they moved them to West Indies. Here on Jamaica, in Haiti, Dominica, you have the highest population of that is Black and African origin. So from here, there were big slave markets, and they were being like sold to uh, American or Mexican guys to Colombia. But as you can see, that Portuguese moved like 1/3 of these African slaves to Brazil directly. So that's why you had this very different, like very mixed up ethnicity and racial things. So that's why even racial prejudice, in case especially of Brazil, is really useless. What other things I wanted to mention? And also there were some parts like from Cameroon and Central, like Equatorial Africa, that most of these slaves were being sold to USA. So even the visually, some of these African guys with African Americans look different than some other like black raced guys in Brazil, for example. This is description of slave ship from the 19th century, how it was filled up, crowded with people. Many of them died, and the percentage of like mortality was really high. So in terrible conditions. If you want to know more, there are a couple of movies. Actually, even Cloud Atlas, this is symbolically one story is about this, but maybe Amistad, that's a story about a slaver's ship of from America that shipwrecked in the territories of British seas, and British court had to decide whether these people should be deliberated or not because they didn't have slavery anymore, and they had to prove that they are human beings, Black Africans. So very sad stories. Those who are dying or resisting, they were just thrown to the seas. One of the songs, some of the songs of Bob Marley, for example, says that there is like red line behind these slave ships, followed by because like there were flocks of sharks uh, waiting around this slave ship for the people and eating them. So a lot of blood or all around. Still, it was not enough because there are many products and many things that they created kind of international trade, not only between Europe and Americas, but also Africa and even China. So let's have a look at this woman, which is obviously the territory or maybe history of the world from maybe beginning of or late 18th century, I would say. because Russia is already really big, and we have New France, we got British North America, some New Spain still, and so on and on. So European provided mostly these manufactured goods, including weapons, iron goods, mirrors, jewelry, blankets, clothes, and so on. Then you got a lot of stuff from the Northern America, furs and fish that was typically for French and British, timber, tobacco from southern colonies. There was American plant that was became very popular in Europe to be smoked. Slaves, as you can see, sugar from these Caribbean islands, gold and silver from Mexico. Not even when these empires were destroyed. So in Peru and Bolivia and Mexico, they open big gold and silver mines that start to challenge mines of Banska Štiavnica and the world production. Before discovery of America, mines of Banska Štiavnica were probably the richest concerning world as we know it. Maybe not from China. I'm not sure about these things. Okay, slaves brought from Africa, but again, gold and sugar, ebony and slaves. So ebony, this ebon wood, but from Asia, and it was spread it even to Europe and even to Asia. Coffee, silk, gems, spices, pearls, for example, silk, cotton, pepper, spices, tea, porcelain, silk. Ware, raspberry. So in this way, this triangular shape of trade is kind of like slaves, manufacturers, and raw materials. You'll see another map soon, but first I'm going to tell you another stories because later after Spanish and Portuguese conquest and their colonies when they got to India, to Indonesia, and Spaniards conquered Americas. As I said, that both of these countries were replaced by new countries that were more effective in economy, that's able to build navy, fleets with ships and bring enough people, enough colonies to conquer those worlds. So even in this picture, there's one of the last big expedition of Spaniards who believed to discover another new uh, like golden empires, which they believe. They call it El Dorado. And that was, for example, Coronado's expedition in American Southwest, in New Mexico, Texas. And like concerning geography, it was excellent, excellent expedition. But it was complete failure because only a couple of guys survived from original 500 men, and some of them remained living among Native Americans and these Indian tribes, but what they remained were only horses in the prairies. Those horses got wild, and because they got great pastures in the prairies, in the grasslands, with buffaloes and herds of buffaloes, so local Indian tribes learned how to tame them, these mustangs, and as they call them, and that was first gift, actually second gift after diseases that was brought to Native Americans were horses, mustangs, but this thing depicts another second and last expedition of Spaniards along the Mississippi River, Hernando de Soto, again moving after the conquest of Incas Empire to the Mississippi. And as you can see, the Native Americans, Northern American Indians coming here. It looks very triumphal, doesn't it? But the truth was that these guys came most like this guy, like desperate, destroy hungry, close like destroy. So not very true. Okay, what other exploration and empires appeared in here in this nice map? It depicts Del Magellan, as you can see, and Sebastian del Cano. But what followed later on? As I said, that New Spain is Greenland, but Portuguese also conquered these lands, but they set new colonies in Angola and Mozambique and in famous these days Zanzibar. And though know that what is happening, some of you are still there, so if I were you, I would never go there like these days. So risky, guys. But then from India, they moved to Indonesia, but soon they were replaced, as you can see, by the Dutch. The same thing was Cape of Good Hope. And what happened? Dutch just organized their navy and decided what is the weakest, which is the weakest country among them? The Portuguese. So let's attack their territories. And they start to attack them and pick up the best places. So South Africa, Indonesia, these islands of spices, and even Dutch Guiana that is called Suriname these days. Okay, what about the French? French also replaced, but they didn't mean to use this slavery state because I would say scientific revolution, enlightenment, and slowly uh, coming enlightenment caused that not they decided to take up most like colonizing and trading, and that was the thing that they managed to take over and colonize the delta of the Mississippi River and actually all its rivers around, so all Midwest of USA, but also the mouth of the St. Lawrence River, Quebec, Montreal, this francophone Canada. The other thing was that even English organized their colonies mostly like private companies, sometimes supported by king, sometimes by private investors. That was case of the colony settling in east coast of USA, but also the Hudson Company or Hudson Bay Company, or sometimes called Rupert Land, who believed there could be passage to Asia, but they didn't manage to find it. What else? India is still independent like China, but it will not last for a long time because India will be occupied by French and English and the British, and later British prevailed and India became colony of England. Dutch actually kept here, remained here for centuries until the 20th century, but until after the Second World War they had to withdraw after the decolonization process. And Spaniards in here in the Philippines because already Magallanes claimed these islands for here according to the Treaty of Tordesillas. That was just the territories they could claim, still could claim. Okay, the other thing that is not very visible that the Dutch would later on settle also in Australia, but again they will be banished by British. So what I told you about England was among the first countries concerning North America. They wanted to participate but didn't have any voyagers, so King Henry the Sixth, or seventh, I believe it was Henry the Seventh already. The sixth one, which is Henry the Tudor, and they just were looking. Is there any Italian navigator living in England? And in London, there was one guy called Giovanni Capoto. What a surprise! But he found himself a nice, pretty lady from England. I know this is unbelievable, but that happens, and his name was already John Cabot, and so he was forced to build a ship and organize first English voyage across the Atlantic, during which he actually discovered North American coast and he mapped it and he came back. Later on, they started to build up colonies, which I will speak more about American, I mean history of USA, the establishment with all these establishment of Virginia, of Massachusetts, of Cape Cod colony, of course, the Salem witchcraft trials and Pilgrim Fathers and all these early histories, including with the legends in here. Okay, but the English moved on later on when they realized that probably it would be good if they colonize some of the land. Still, uh, they wanted to know how big are those lands. So Queen Elizabeth I, after successful war against Spain, in which Spanish galleons failed to invade England, we'll learn about this soon. So she sent Francis Drake, one of her main admirals, to become a corsair. It means a pirate who is sailing not under the skull and bones pirate flag, but under the flag of Kingdom of England. And they raided Spanish galleons. Many of them were being sunk in the Atlantic Ocean. Today, for scuba divers, it's really great treasure. Like there is big hunt for these sunk, shipwrecked Spanish galleons. Many of them became pirates. They didn't want to obey English or British or French rule. And you know that in Cuba, in the Bahamas especially, there were famous pirate ports, and for that reason I maybe recommend you to watch Black Sails, the TV show, TV series Black Sails about pirates. Many of them are like invented, but actually basic point is there, including case of slavery in kind of pirate ships. So that was really interesting stuff. Francis Drake later on, after the successful raids, was chosen to be the guy to organize second voyage around the world. That happened actually like 30 or 40 years after Magellan, because this voyage was so terrible that even many years, many decades after that, nobody was too stupid enough to organize another voyage. But this Francis Drake voyage was organized much better, and they decided to just map it. It was really geographical expedition. So the expedition, as you will see, followed the Magellan's route, but then they didn't cross the Pacific Ocean, but they just mapped and sailed along the coast of South, Central, and even North America when they almost got to the islands of Canada, of Island Vancouver. And from here, they moved and start to map, discover the ocean. They actually had some idea how big it is, so they followed the other stuff. That's why they had already great knowledge, a lot of knowledge in the Pacific Ocean. And later on, another, like after big wars, and England and United Kingdom of Great Britain was created, so they had enough money, enough finances to build another expeditions, but it was already in the mid 18th century, and that was famous James Cook expeditions. This famous navigator had a lot of voyages all around the Pacific Ocean, in which during which he discovered many islands and many new countries that we have in here. So this is the only like James Cook expeditions. As you can see, he mapped like from even Bering Straits down to, is actually Bering Straits is named according to the other guy that I will mention soon. Okay, what about France? As I said, at France, so they headed mostly to North America. There were a couple of discoverers that were famous, like Jacques Cartier or Samuel de Champlain. These guys, they explored the Saint Lawrence River, that is really big mouth, and many people, ústě mouth, they believe that it's passage to the sea, because the water was like mixed, with the solid water. And even when they got to Great Lakes, so you couldn't see, they're really huge, they couldn't see the other bank, so they believe it's like inner sea, and maybe over that, on the other side, there is new continent that they had to sail for a couple of days across the Great Huron Lake, or Slaves Lake, and so on. When they got here, so at least they started to trade with Native Americans, with these Indian tribes, traded especially first, and that became main economical activity of the French, who were at the beginning more popular than the British or Spaniards, because they were not slave masters, and Indians respected them more, which is interesting. And even if you watch the Revenant movie, so French is being heard more often than English, because this guy was spreading silver in here. And together with these Great Lakes, Spaniards, if you remember, also claimed the mouth and the delta of the Mississippi River. Here they built a new fortress, a new town called New Orleans, so New Orleans, and they start to sail against the stream of the Mississippi and building fortresses and trade posts, from which again they started this trade with furs and Indians, and gradually they met with their comrades from the north, and they created really huge territory called Louisiana, according to the names of the kings of France of those times, of Louis the 14th, the 15th, and even the 16th. So that's why all these territories were French. Why there is no French language, sorry, no Spanish but French, why there are not French guys today. There are, you can see like towns like St. Louis, for example, St. Louis Blues. You can see that some basketball teams are got names Huguenots. I will tell you about Calvinist Protestant religion from France called Huguenots. So there is long tradition, especially these place names. But I think the point was that the French just sold Louisiana to the USA, and we will learn about this too. Okay, what remained francophonic were two provinces of later what we call Canada, which is originally Indian name, Native American name, and it was Quebec and Montreal. Even both towns look very European. They got trams and actually castles, which is actually hotel today, Chateau, Quebec, and so on. This is my favorite picture of one of the French explorers, Jean Nicolet, who crossing Lake Huron and banged on the other side, and he believed he already got to Asia, to China. So as a tribute to Chinese indigenous culture, so he dressed himself in Chinese clothes with dragons, and even he was holding fireworks that he got from China to show them that he knows the traditions of fireworks and so on. And of course, surprised Winnebago Indians who were like Iroquois or Huron origin, I'm not sure, just wondering at him. And of course, they start to speak the same language as his guides that he had from canoes and from ships built in here. Okay, that were French and the Dutch. Okay, so this is for Mr. Haas, for Peter de Haas. The Dutch start to pick up these like easy peasy praise for them, baits for them, that were the Portuguese. The point was that they really managed to have these things in claim these colonies. You cannot see it again because of my face in here, but I can tell you that there is Indonesia, which is, as I said, until 20th century. Also, they claim South Africa, and they start to settle in here. You know, the Netherlands is a country that is really small, much smaller than Slovakia, and it's all plain, and even large parts of it are under the sea level, protected only by these boulders and dams. So they really missed like a lot of land. And when they found this South Africa, and down in the south it's not so hot and really good for farming and settling. So many of these settlers, which in Dutch is called boer, so they start to settle down, and they actually spread it so much population in here that even they banish local Zulu or Bantu African tribes and big nations, and they had actually their own states. Even when British invaded these Portuguese Boer colonies, Boerske colonies, speaking language that is called Afrikaan. African language is combination of Dutch, of Bantu and Zulu languages, and a bit of British English language. So this African language was already in inland. So when British invaded these lands in late 19th century, so Boer republics proclaimed their independence in the midlands. So there was terrible Boer wars by 1901, and only at that time British forced them to subject it. These actually white racist republics in the middle of African territories were the basic stuff for apartheid, racist segregation regime that ended up in early 1990s when I was a young boy. I can remember Nelson Mandela, Frederick de Klerk, how they made peace in racist country in the middle of Africa, the south of Africa, in which blacks didn't have any rights. Okay, what else? So the Dutch colonized South Africa as Boers, Indonesia, but on their voyages they also discovered Australia and even Tasmania and even New Zealand, and that's why many of these names held the name of Abel Tasman, famous Dutch navigator that made a lot of geographical expeditions in here. You may be surprised, but even Russia is among these exploring countries because the point was that when, after the Battle of Kulikovo Pole, Russians managed to push Mongols from the Khanate of Golden Horde, and they start to attack local small Khanates south of Urals mountains against Tatars near Kazan and so on. And once they open or conquered these big cities and small Khanates, suddenly they realized that there are huge plains due to Kazakhstan, almost to China, and also with the taiga, and there were actually weak Siberian tribes, especially in Russian armies, when Russian armies had possessed fire guns. So again, just like these Western Europeans had advantage against Americans and Africans, so suddenly Russians had advantage against Siberian tribes or Mongol or these nomadic tribes of Central Asia. In this way, especially during the rule of Tsar Ivan the Terrible, they led great inland expansion into Siberia, which you are obliged to show with kind of way. Today, it can be actually copied along the Trans-Siberian Railway because it was the main route, and of course not in taiga, but south of taiga, these huge dense coniferous forests. But also They actually took over Mongol Khanate, and in this way they finally got to the Pacific Ocean in this way. So for that reason they also tried to map the coast, because it's always easier at the time to travel by ship because of a large cargo and load you can carry on the ship than to walk or have horses. So in this way you realize that you need to have a lot of expeditions. So here in the Arctic Ocean, Russians organized these voyages, but again they didn't have many experts, many navigators from their own land. So early Russian navigators were actually foreigners who were hired to do that. And because Spaniards and Portuguese and Italians were all like occupied, so they offered it to the Dutch, like Willem Barents, who discovered all these lands and islands in the Arctic Ocean. And finally, even the Danish navigator, the Dane Vitus Bering, who was the second guy who mapped, and actually was the one who mapped the Bering Straits before even James Cook got here, but he gave it a name, the Bering Strait. From here, when Russians actually expanded in Siberia, they just crossed the Bering Strait, which is only a couple of kilometers, couple of miles wide, and they start to build colonies and villages even in Alaska, so in America. So that's why some of the names, even Alaska or Kodiak, are actually Russian, Slavic names. So some of the fortresses, as you can see in this post stamp, are actually like celebration of for the anniversary of Russian colonizing Alaska. Again, what happened that Alaska was not used as much as it gets. Russians enough work to do uh, with Siberia. So when Americans offered them to buy Alaska from Russia, they didn't hesitate. They took gold like $2 million and they leave it to the USA. And you know what? The next year, American explorers found that there is a lot of gold in the rivers of Alaska. So there was the second golden rush, and they earned more money from Alaska today, even more because of oil. Okay, I need to check the time. So how much time I have? 20 minutes. So it seems that we may start another topic, reformation. So generally, age of results of the age of this exploration, not only for America, but generally for the world, would be these great discoveries, great knowledge, new knowledge of the world. So new geographical and physical and biological and historical actually knowledge brings a lot of changes in thinking. Maybe you even experience this right now. If not, definitely at university you will, that your thinking will change, that many of the stereotypes we possess can be changed due to traveling, due to talking to people from various countries, races, languages, religions, and understanding them really makes it different, that you become a different person. That makes also in things that there is religious reformation in here, because suddenly you don't need to respect the pope, you can respect just the book that you follow. Okay, so all these discoveries are changing this. Of course, there was great development of transportation, especially in this naval form, in the ships and boats. They allowed also develop trade and provide new markets, because even Europe can process all the products from America, but again, many things from Europe can be processed and consumed in Americas, the same in Africa or in Asia. New resources were being new sources of work or labor, new products and crops. Among them, the most famous, of course, from here: potatoes, corn or maize in American English, tomatoes, beans, tobacco, coffee. And that's all from here. Again, you have many of them with squash, turkey, cocoa, peanuts, avocado, pumpkins, pineapples, peppers, tobacco, vanilla, sweet potatoes, quinine, and so on. But as you can see, there were other things that were brought, and that was, for example, syphilis. Syphilis is actually really harsh to hear, but syphilis appeared from the raping of South American women, indigenous women, by Spanish conquistadors. And they had a small virus that was not dangerous for them. They were resistant. that was brought from their husbands, who, just like our shepherds in the mountains of Slovakia, during the summer they went out with their flocks of sheep, so they spent all the summer with our women. So there was probably some zoophilia, just like also in the ants with llamas. And they brought this virus to their wives, and their wives were raped by the Spanish conquistadors, and they were sick, and they brought it to Europe, and they have syphilis. STD, so sexually transmitted disease, appeared in here. But on the other hand, Europeans brought all these diseases: smallpox, influenza, typhus, measles, malaria from Africa, diphtheria, and whooping cough. So as I said, maybe 90% of population of pre-Columbian America died because of these diseases. For example, Africans were more resilient even to malaria that was brought to Amazonia, for example, or to Caribbean. So these mosquitoes were not so dangerous for them as for Europeans, and even for Native Americans, for the indigenous people. Okay, what else? But even from Europe, grapes, turnips, so we call it radish, for example, onion, sugarcane. From Africa, bananas. From Mediterranean, olives or cypress fruits. Uh, Pears and peaches, and from Africa, coffee, for example, beans. Even bees. If you were wondering that bees are going to extinct or something, and there will be nothing, but they had no beans. There hadn't been beans in this like modern form in America. There were various form wasps and so on, and bumblebees, and they were the guys who were bringing and changing the seeds, from various plants. So it's not such a big deal. Still, we had also Africa in here. So, for example, Europeans exported trinkets, various unemployment valuable jewelry, liquors. This was important thing how to manipulate local population is to bring them whiskey or rum from Caribbean, from sugarcane. And very quickly, those people got drunk and they got addicted to alcohol. So this is even in the Winnetou movies, that actually fake stories of Indian tribes, but some of these chieftains were actually like poisoned, and corrupted due to the alcohol addiction. Guns, definitely, that is basic thing how you can control them, and if you had European guns you could fight them back. From Asia, rice, but also barley, oats, horses were brought from Europe. Smallpox, malaria, measles, we mentioned. Pigs, for example. What else we didn't mention? Sheep, for example, were brought to America. Okay, cattle generally, but all of these. So you see, that was really big thing. I also mentioned this price revolution, and this caused that either if you spend these times of crisis in the way of investments or just wasting the gold. If you wasted gold, like Spanish or Portuguese, your kingdoms decline in upcoming centuries. Spain and Portugal, both countries were really poor in the 19th century. And even in 20th century, they were underdeveloped, even to Czechoslovakia. Last years in European Union, we actually are getting very closely to Portugal, for example. We are better than Greece. So you see that sometimes this climate and agriculture gives you something for the industry and also for the economy of the country. If you don't have it, you have to be clever, educated, and you have to do trade and business. And that was the thing for England, because they couldn't use at the time coal so far, not yet, but they had a lot of wool, so let's make trade with this. But there was free market and open, mostly I would call it democratic government, not pretty like open democracy as we know it, but the point that there was constitutional monarchy and they could elect their representatives even in the colonies. The problem was that colonies didn't have representatives in British Parliament. That's why they rebelled and proclaimed United States of America. We'll learn about this soon. French, for example, they had it in different way. Their own country was run out of resources. So what they did, they imported raw materials from Africa, from Asia, from America, and in France, they opened manufacturers that uh, even they were supported by a king. They were given money to open like start-ups manufacturers, and from wood, from metals, They produced high quality luxury goods. They were sold to Russia, to England, to Scandinavia, or even Italy. It's called mercantilism. It's a way of economy that you bring cheap materials, you make things in your own country and sell it back for much higher price in the form of excellent luxury tools or goods and so on. Now, the Dutch was the greatest example of, if you cannot use the soil, just claim some nice lands for you, colonize it, and just develop it. But even for the Dutch, it took many years to understand that slavery is not very efficient, that it's much cheaper actually, and even effective to have free population that is willing to freely farm in and build industry and economy. So that was either like development, for example, for our countries that was decline. Not only that Ottoman Empire invaded our lands, but also this American crisis in here. And we really had also because of religious wars later on. There was a big gap between East. So I mean East, Central, and Western Europe. The other thing is that they created so-called colonial empires. For example, Spain, during the rule of Habsburg, Philip II the Habsburg, it was said that there is no sunset or sunrise above the Spanish Habsburg Empire because at any moment of the day there was sun shining on some part of the Spanish lands because even Philippines were there, America. So either Europe or Asia or in America, some lands of the Spanish kings were being enlightened by sun. England, they created something we call British Empire that before the Second World War was 1/5 of the world whole. France, imagine from Canada, Madagascar, how many countries in Africa speak French? By 1950s, they held even French Indochina, which is today Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia. You can speak French in Caribbean islands. You can speak in French Guiana in America, in Canada. You can speak French in Tahiti, where Milan Rastislav Stefani was there and speak using French. So you see that big colony empires, and they actually ruled world up to the 20th century, and caused again many like wars and uprising rebellions of original population, decolonization process, especially in 20th century, and slavery as the other last part. Okay, that is not your bonus task because you have this task in your assignment. So I want you to draw, paint some like similar map like this one, this one about explorers and their routes all around the world. Of course, mark them with various colors. I know that second graders are not very happy about this, but imagine that instead of this, you could have had the test. So I believe that you rather take some time, organize your time, and make it like in good way so it's fine. It will be given nice ones for here. Okay, I rather check my time because we are in the last slide, and if it's worth it to open new, so probably not. I'm not going to start new topic for here. So the remaining minutes, I will give you just the idea about many of the videos that John Green Crash Course History have in here. So in various of the links, all of them deals with this topic, and you see it's not only about exploration but about colonizing these lands, all the world, about interaction and all the exchange that this age of exploration brought, because it was really crucial. So in this video we'll see how fast is the internet and how loud is my volume in here. Okay, so this video, commerce, snorkel, camels, Indian Ocean trade was not only about Portuguese conquest of these lands, but it is also about Arabic trade. And this is something what I told you that they're very often forgotten guys who spread Islam even to Indonesia, and how it had been before arrival of Portugal, that even China had their own stuff. You know, Crusaders, they discovered many of these stuff. So uh, that was really interesting video that you can watch and see it from different perspective, that they think that there hadn't been anything before Europeans. No, this is called Eurocentristic. We are centered only in European style, but this is something that had been there before, even these Chinese trade ships and so on. So this was really interesting. Okay, let's open the other one. Okay, my video is already on.
so I will put it later in here. Okay, but for you, this is about something we talk about Columbus, Da Gama, and Cheng He. He concerned only on these three navigators and compare them. Even the Cheng He was interesting to compare. Columbian Exchange is this video that I just told you about, and he more precisely, more deeply explained these things. So maybe some part about, yeah, you got syphilis and smallpox style. Okay. So everything I told you about this stuff. Okay, but I'm not going to. I would rather need some preview of the video, so let it be. Okay, what else is in here? Okay, slave trade. This is also, of course, concerned not only beginnings, but especially on the America to USA or to Brazil and so on. Spanish Empire, that would be also interesting. Uh, and another thing explaining in here and talking about this inflation. I told you about devaluation of the currency of the golden and silver coins, but it causes also inflation. It means rise of the prices of the other products. So if you don't have silver and gold, still many products are much more expensive suddenly. As this is something of the Spanish Empire conquest of Latin America. So that's also interesting. So if you are interested more deeply, so read it. James Cook, this would be really nice. I'm not sure whether there are some movies, but definitely there must be some series or documentaries. What I can remember when I was a boy, there was some nice documentary series about James Cook. Yeah, that was really interesting. Well, just like Magalhães died in the Philippines, so James Cook was killed in the Hawaii Islands, and that was also something like we can kill this white devilish god because he can eat his heart and be powerful. And interesting that even there still were kings in Hawaii Islands until they were annexed, okupovaní, by United States of America. And Hawaii Islands are just like Texas were being annexed. And they, of course, asked people who were willing to accept American rule, just like it is in Crimea or Donbass in Ukraine. They, of course, they would ask only pro-Russian guys, not pro-Ukrainian guys. Okay, age of exploration generally. Would be the period of mostly of these Portuguese navigations or Italian, Spanish navigations, and they are part when he speaks more slowly because he got another third or fourth channel about history. First was world history, then world history 2 more general, and the third was American history. And this is fourth channel that is actually for us, for Europeans. He speaks more slowly and more precisely, and he actually speaks about European history. So, from this point of Eurocentristic history, I think that many people realize that Belgrade, look at this, okay, this is White Castle, Ottoman Empire, that would be our history, like speaking about this. But the point is that very often they need to understand even what is happening in Europe, humanism, Renaissance, development of various kingdoms. Like I had told you firstly about unification of Spain and creation of Portugal. We cannot have like suddenly Portugal appearing popped up, and we had it. No, we need to understand. So this is age of this exploration from the point of view of Europe, and he actually explains the things that I also told you. Actually, I haven't seen this video, so I think that can be also something that kind of Tenochtitlan, Montezuma, and so on. Okay, I think that there were also other videos from this presentation too. So European expansion would be again about the thing that I told you today. So about French, Dutch, British expansion overseas and the lands we have it in here. If you're surprised, I have no commercials because I pay for YouTube €6 every month, so they do not disturb me. So I can listen to music from YouTube without any disturbing things. Okay, so this is something that we have in here.
and
from
I don't know what
various
to
Dutch
say.
states
Okay, maybe
and other
East
middle-aged
India
chartered civil
Company.
corporations.
Sometimes
So
these
each company
companies were
performed a
organized by
variety of
states, sometimes
functions,
by
from
private
gathering
investors,
investors,
but generally
building
they
ships,
organized
to
people
raising
from Europe
armies and
to
taking
get on the
over new
ships, come
territory
to
and
America
enslaving
or to
people
West
who
or
worked
East
for
Indies
good
and
land.
settle them
I
down.
guess you think that like
And they
corporations
would pay
are
taxes,
relatively
and from the
legal.
income
Which
and
brings
from the
us to the
taxes from
slave trade.
this international
Initially,
Atlantic
Portuguese
trade,
sailors sought to
they would
cash
have
out the things they
money.
had, to spot
And
along the
investors who
coast and then
invested
sell
to
them
this
as
company
slaves
like
in
10
Europe.
or 15
But by the
years
end of the 16th
before
century,
ago,
the capture of
so
Africans
suddenly
for
they have
sale to
like great money
Europeans
and they would be
became
millionaires, but
routine,
also
and then
suddenly from
eventually a
this slave
massive
trade
business for both.
and consequences. Okay, the last video in here about commerce and slavery again, that would probably from the point of view or maybe for Europeans. So commerce, agriculture, slavery again with this things we have in here. Okay, how they settled down, and that would be by 19th and even maybe 20th century. That among them there were
Industry and
also
diamond
even
The slave trade
Slovaks,
into the
Slovak people
Americas was part of a
emigrating from
global, not
Austria-Hungary
just
and
triumph
settling in here. But that would be different
of
topic, guys.
homes and
That would be
possessions.
a topic
Of
about America
capitalism
and
and
maybe about our
aristocracy.
period 19th century period of awakening. So I have the last minute, so that is perfect timing for me. And thanks for attention, guys. Don't forget to respond to questions. Keep on working. You know that probably in probably 1 month, I will expect you to hand me over your assignments. If you have any question, don't hesitate to ask, because you see it's more like lectures, not like lessons. That would be about communication. So next lesson we are moving on to Reformation and religious wars. I estimate this topic to last for about like 3 or 4 lessons. So that's all for me. Have a nice day. Bye bye, guys.